cool. Hey, DeAndre Brown, I'm happy to have you here today. AKA the corporate baddie, AKA the Gen Z expert in the corporate workforce.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, I think what you do is amazing because just to get into it is that you don't just bring humor into it, you bring the real culture. It's like, this is a new generation of employees, entrepreneurs, people that aren't taking what the other generation, I'm a millennial. So it's like we have half of that, but we don't have half of that so I just want to first get into your background and why this type of content. Where'd you get your start, and how do you just get inspired to make these things that feel original and that we can all relate to? That's like three questions in one.
No, yeah, but I'll start with just telling a little bit about my background. So I went to college. I went to Morehouse College, and while I was at Morehouse, I was really good at like navigating corporate spaces. I had like a lot of phenomenal internships at like top investment banks, Supreme Court, New York City. And I realized then that I had a gift at this, and people would always come to me and say, "Hey, how do you do this? Like, can you help look at my resume and stuff like that?" So when I graduated and I started working in corporate America, I was like, you know what? I think I want to do that. I wanted just to make extra money at the time, and I knew that I was good at it. And I also really wanted to more minorities to be in these spaces, corporate spaces, because I realized just from internships and stuff, how much of a difference we can make when we are in these spaces and when our voices are heard within corporate spaces. So that's how I kind of started. And I, had maybe one or two clients off of TikTok. And I realized that I really enjoyed making videos, and I was literally posting every single day. And from there, I realized, I wonder what would happen if I actually came up with a strategy to like actively grow my channel. So I started doing research on TikTok, and I saw that like over 70% of the users were Gen Z, but I still wanted to talk about corporate America specifically because I was in corporate. It was something I related to, and I still wanted to educate people on how to get into the spaces as well. So then after that research, I said, well, I'm Gen Z. I'm in corporate. How can I can just talk about Gen Z from a corporate lens? So then I just started making those type of videos and went to bed, woke up, and like I had millions of views, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is actually good. So that's kind of how I got started. So it was a bit of a pivot because, as you know, as you heard, like I started as just trying to basically consult people on how to get into corporate America, and then it turned into, oh well, now you're speaking for Gen Z specifically. So it's like but I'm still doing the same thing while doing both. So basically, it showed me that although I had something specifically in my mind, there was like a way bigger plan for me. And I was able to not only educate people on how to get into these spaces and encourage people to get into corporate America, but I also was encouraging people who were in corporate and those who were specific, who were eventually joining corporate on how they can also set their boundaries and, not stress themselves out while working in this field as well. So that's a little bit about the background of how I started, and then how I kind of adapted corporate baddie and talked about Gen Z in the workforce.
No, I love that. And I love that you're very transparent when it comes to your social media presence, right? Like so in like June when you said, you did this full time, and you were even very open about that it was a branding thing as well too, because you came out as a corporate baddie, but now you're your own full-time entrepreneur. How do you tie those two things in? And then also learning that within your company, people had issues with your content and whatnot. Can you speak to why corporations and have this kind of policy on social media where it's like you're not doing it on their clock, you're not doing it in their office spaces? How can corporations let people like yourself be yourself, do your own thing without feeling that it's infringing upon corporate social media policies and practices?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question and a conversation that needs to be addressed a lot more, because I see a lot of times on social media, especially once I quit my job, how other people have issues like with working and being on social media while working in corporate America. And I think that it depends on where and what you do for work specifically, because I know a lot of times I've seen that when you work in tech and like more like TikTok, or you work at IG or Facebook, et cetera, they're more accepting of you posting on social media However, when you work at more traditional type corporations like banking, et cetera, they're not as accepting of it. And I think that it's important that the social media guidelines that are in place, that they do begin to shift and change as we continue to progress as a society, because we see that social media and just the internet in general is such a huge part of human interactions these days. So to limit a person on what they can and cannot post or can and cannot do is just not going to be beneficial moving forward for corporations and also for humans as well. And it's going to start to, I believe it's going to start to, people are going to start to turn down positions that do have very strict social media guidelines as well.
Definitely, I can see that happening. I want to get a little bit into how you've been able to pivot and become, be your own full-time entrepreneur and small business owner. But I would love to ask a couple questions on, your thoughts on corporate responsibility when it comes to certain things, right? So let's say corporate structure. We talk about traditional versus new age. What is one thing you've seen that a lot of corporations miss the mark when it comes to not just even Gen Zs, but millennials when it comes to really bringing them on? Because you have your content where you make me laugh when you say things where they're like, oh, teamwork. And you're like, okay, I'm good. Or we love entrepreneur would love you to be like, no, I'm good, because you showcase that, some people are really like, hey, I'm here for a job. I'm not trying to be your family. I'm not trying to be your best friend. Don't give us, pizza for a pizza party. Give us a raise,
Right.
So why do you think a lot of these companies miss the mark, and how can they, even if maybe they don't have all the tools and all the understanding, but to, retain a person like yourself or someone that may be the next one?
Yeah, I think that just from my personal perspective, and then just hearing from a lot of other people's perspectives as well and what they also have to say, it seems as if a lot of corporations tend to what's the word? A lot of corporations tend to try to, I guess, like, I don't think bluff is the word, but they do these little gestures so you feel more connected, and so then it's like a way for them to get over at throwing more toward on your plate and things like that. But I think the way that corporations really can keep and retain talent is by doing and listening to what the talent actually wants. So, even just looking at videos and seeing online, like, we don't care about pizza parties. I think that those are great tools to build, I guess, a community at the workplace. But outside of just that, we want more than that. We want the raise. We don't want just things to be, I guess, fluffed over, like, oh, we'll do this instead of doing this, when there could be, when we know that corporations have budget to give more. And I think that specifically as an African American, we're already like given less than our counterparts. And we also are expected to work harder than our counterparts. And not even just African Americans, minorities in general. And it's just crazy. Like you see they're doing things about pizza parties and stuff like that, when there's so much other things that could be doing in place of that, to prioritize our mental health, to check-ins on us. Because I mean, yes, we're in these corporations, but we don't talk about the fact that we have to code switch twice within workforces, and how that can be a huge part of our mental health. And then with socially in the world and things that we witness around us, and it's like that isn't brought up in the workplace at all. So it's like there's so much that we're dealing with, and I think just hearing and understanding from your employees is a good start. But like I said, nothing is a one-man show. So that's that.
Definitely. I mean, even before starting my own business, I come from a corporate communication and branding background, right? And so I worked with startups, and sometimes they bring in the corporate structure, right? They think you have to work the 8 to 10 hour days and different things. And I used to always tell them, I said, what can you not do in 4 hours? Why don't you have the most productive 4 hours of your life? Don't drag it out to 8 hours. Don't give somebody 30-minute to 45-minute lunch. Because honestly, at the end of lunch, I probably don't want to come back.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. And I think that just moving forward, that's a great point you bring up. Instead of there being like these 4 hour, instead of there being like 8 to 5, it just starts to become, and I see this in tech a lot. I always reference tech because I've met and connected with a lot of people in the tech field, and they tell me, well, that's how it is for us, where they don't have to necessarily be glued to their desk all day. It's like you complete your assignments and you can go about your business. And I think that's a great way or a great approach to take, because it's like, why are we holding people to somewhere if there's nothing to be done and there's nothing to accomplish? It's just, I don't know. It's just like, I think that moving forward, that should also be a thing where we just complete our assignments and then we can go about our business and go about our days as well.
No, definitely. Because when you look at the structure of any more corporations, it's based off of Taylorism, right? It's based off of the automobile industry, textile. It's not really based off of the true reality, even if you coming from banking, right? It's the difference between a banker needing, if you need to be a teller, but if you need to be X, Y, and Z, a financier or anything. I think the problem is we still haven't really re-looked at what structures look like for us in this century. We still kind of rely on these old models and stock exchange and what's happening in Japan. And we were just like, most of those people who are making those decisions aren't us. So we're not, DeAndre isn't waking up worried about if the publicly traded company is doing well in Beijing. He is worried about if his bills are paid and if he's about to go to brunch and have a cute little time.
Right. And I think even then, like, we see an increase in productivity when, and this is actual true stats, like there's increased productivity when we don't, I guess, micromanage and are forcing employees to stay at work and do things even when they don't necessarily have much to do. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that changes in the years to come.
Definitely. Before we get into you as a full-time entrepreneur, before you left your job in June, could there have been any way that the job could have kept you, or where you already kind of like, I see myself on the way out. I see this isn't this isn't where God has laid my path out.
Yeah. I always said, and I was even trying while I was working in my job to come up with a strategy on how they could utilize, I guess, influencers within the company to, like, encourage Gen Z specifically to apply for positions at the corporation. And that was what I was something I was working on, like on the side of my other projects that I was doing. And I thought that I could have been a huge help, like I felt like I did a great job at connecting a target audience that the company was actually trying to target. And it's like, so, but I think the reason why I said, what, I think I'm just gonna head out is because, well, several reasons. And we can start with the fact that it was really difficult. I was hardly sleeping. I was hardly getting any rest because I was working my job full time. And then also when I was done working, I was dealing with the demands from like brand deals and stuff like that. So it was a lot. And this is when things were picking up. So it was very difficult. And then also, while there were a lot of people who were supportive of my content, there were a lot of people who also weren't supportive of it. And, I would hear, I didn't really know that they weren't supportive, but I realized that I would be treated differently by higher ups, so like SVPs in the corporation. Yeah. And then
that's not your business. That's actually that's not your business at all. What I do on my damn time.
Right. Yeah. So that's how I felt. I was like, okay, well, that was that. And then also the last reason why I was like, what, I'm just gonna leave was because when I was thinking about putting them in my 2 weeks and I was just talking to HR about it, about like the stress and how overwhelmed I was, they were like, well, there has been a lot of conversation about the content that you post on social media and stuff like that. And I was like, after that meeting, I was like, actually, I'm gonna just put in my 2 weeks and I'm gonna leave, because I just felt like I wasn't called to that anymore. And I thought that my purpose was bigger than just within the corporation. So yeah, that's why I just quit, and I've been just doing my own thing now, and I've been blessed and things have been going well, and God has continued to lead me in the right paths, and I'm just trusting his process.
I love that. I love that. And taking that step is not easy, taking that leap of faith, right? What was it? What was the defining moment, not from HR and I'm like, oh, this company's trash, what, you guys aren't supportive, but what was it for DeAndre that let him know that he can do this? You know what I mean? Because a lot of people say, I want to do it, but there's this fear. What was it that let you know that forget the fear? If it works, it works. If it flops, it flops. But DeAndre has to do this right now.
Oh, ooh, that's a really good question. Gosh, let me think about that.
Yeah.
I was like, I really think it was the fact that things were picking up so much. Like at first it would just be me make a video in my, I was making videos out of my apartment and, I was still working, but then it became a thing where I had just literally I had just got nominated for a content career creator of the year. I was like, oh my God, this is huge. So then it was that. And then I was getting asked to speak on all these panels, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is big. And I'm like, that's when I realized that people actually cared about my perspective outside of just on social media. Because we see a lot of creators on social media these days, but the very few are asked to speak on panels. They're asked to do interviews and all this stuff. So that's when I realized, like, wait, this is really actually big and I can go really far with this. And I said, you know what, I don't really need this job, and I didn't want to feel limited. And I realized that I could do so much more than if I just quit.
No, I like that because it's when you said about there are a lot of content creators, and I tell a lot of people, especially in the business, you meet, we talk to, there's a difference between an influencer and someone of influence, right? Influencers, you can get tons of views, you can get tons of likes, you can get tons of fire emojis under. But when you're of influence, did someone listen to your advice? Did someone listen to your music? Did someone buy that item? There's a big difference than influencer and being of influence. And, you're someone of influence because you actually have been asked to speak because your opinion matters to them. And not only does your opinion matter, you have to think about it. These are organizations and, and things that, that means your name is in other rooms where you're not even present and you're not even thinking about it. You doing your own thing and there are people like, hey, who's this person? So I just think that's, I want to take my hat off to you.
Thank you.
Figuratively for that, because that's definitely at such a young age and someone who's challenging the status quo. Do you ever sometimes sit back and go, this is really happening right now?
And it's crazy because everyone else always says it, and I don't really sit back. And I think that that's something that I'm working on myself, is just sitting back and being like, just basking in all the success and all that God has blessed me with within the span of a year. But I think because things this year have been moving so fast, it's like I was working, then I quit my job, then I moved to LA, then it's like, it was something every week. So now I think that's something that I'm really working on in the year to come to, is really just sitting in like what I've been able to do. And especially as a Black gay man, we do not get a lot of these opportunities. So it's like, it's really a blessing. And I think that it's important that I sit in that as well.
No, definitely. Some unsolicited advice before a couple more questions, because I want to be conscious of your time. One thing I realized myself as someone who started his own business is that the most important thing is to give yourself grace and to be present. So I have this new rule that I take into this year, into even next year, into like moving forward. How many days I've been on, I take that many days off, because DeAndre's working for himself. DeAndre's always on. You have to create, you have to do this. So if like I'm doing this, if I've done something for like 4 days straight, I'm going to take 4 days off, to relax myself so I don't have a burnout. Sometimes we think we don't have that luxury, but you actually do, because you're in control. You can get that brand deal, but you can also let them know, okay, the brand deal is going to start on Friday. Sometimes we feel like we have to rush so much because it's like, I don't want to miss the opportunity, but you realize, wait, you guys called me.
Yeah.
So that means you want my voice to be there. Okay, you can wait a couple more days. I don't have to do this right now.
I definitely have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. So before we go, you talk so much about like Gen Zs and how we should be able to listen to them and understand them. What is something that Gen Zs need to also know about themselves when it comes to the workforce? Because there's always the pros and cons. What is something Gen Zs need to understand? Because I have ran into some of those things where you're just like, come on, like I'm trying to get you with me. Come on, let's do a little bit more work here or there. But then it's just stuck. It's just like I'm not doing it. This is not what I'm about today, you know. So, is there any word of advice you give to Gen Zs that maybe they can do to make sure that they don't miss opportunity, that they don't miss out on, you know, something corporate, something entrepreneurial, you know, something that just can make them not understand that there is also they need to do some work.
Yeah, I think that we have to understand that everything takes time. Things don't change overnight. We can't expect overnight results for corporations that have been built for years, hundreds of years, you know? So I think it's important that, especially like when we think about setting boundaries and not working outside of 9 to 5, and trying to not work outside of our 9 to 5s and things like that, that we also remember that, you know, we have to start slow. We can't just throw everything down on people like this is what it is, you know. That we just have to have things that we're willing to like, I guess, negotiate and go light on, and things that these are our hard boundaries, like this, it's this and nothing, you know. Because like things don't, like I said, things don't happen overnight. So I think that that's really important for us, because I see a lot of my videos, and you know, a lot of my videos, I'm telling the truth, but of course it's exaggerated. But then I see some of the comments and I'm like, people are like, I'm like, wait, whoa, y'all are really like, y'all are
I'm
really
not telling you to run out of this interview like talk. Don't do that. Like, don't. I might close my
right,
video.
like, you see what I'm saying? So that's huge, and that's what I think we need to do. We need to realize that things don't happen overnight, and you know, take some and don't take others, you know. So
Well, thank you so much. Our time is up. I've enjoyed myself, and I always hope the other person has, well as too.
absolutely, this is a great conversation. Thanks for having me again.